I'm Jim Long. In this talk, I'll discuss one of the mysterious residents of Clarksville's past, a woman simply known as Belle. Hers is one of the most visited graves in Clarksville's Riverview Cemetery. I've discovered her identity and I'm going to reveal that to you. Riverview was first known as the City Cemetery. It's located on North Spring Street in Clarksville. It has a great view of the Cumberland and Red Rivers. The cemetery was in use in 1800 or there even earlier by Native Americans. On this aerial view, I have a little yellow star that shows you the location of Belle's grave. And on this sketch of the cemetery, if you come in the main entrance, you can see the yellow star there in section 17. In 1971, a Girl Scout troop did a listing of gravestones at Riverview Cemetery. I'll show you the cover page of that there. You can read that at the library. In the table of contents of that book, you notice that most of the entries are just listed last name, comma, first name. But at the very bottom, we see Belle on page 43, no last name. So what does it say on page 43 of the book? The transcription is Belle departed this life November 12, 1892. And it says this is a large stone with no more info. That's not quite true. There is an inscription here just below the death date that says, "Dearest Lord, one we have laid in the peaceful grave's embrace, but her memory will be cherished till we see thy heavenly face." Belle has long been rumored in Clarksville. In Riverview Cemetery book by Irene Griffey, published by the Historical Society in 2002, Irene writes a section on Belle. There are many different versions of who Belle was, but there's one common thread in all of the rumors, and that is that she was a famous prostitute in Clarksville. The story is that when she died on November 12, 1892, that her manager went around town warning former clients to come pay their respects at the funeral and donate to this large monument, or else he would out them in the Leaf Chronicle. The day of the funeral, therefore, it's said that every carriage and hack in Clarksville was rented out, that there was a long procession at the cemetery of people paying their respects, but everyone stayed in their carriages except for one person who was presumably the minister. The implication there being nobody wanted to reveal themselves as knowing this famous prostitute. There's speculation around Belle that maybe she was from Stewart County and had run away to Clarksville after having a falling out with her parents, or maybe she was shunned because of her profession. There's a rumor that she was a daughter of a prominent Clarksvillian, maybe James Elder, or maybe a prominent banker. There's speculation that she may have died of a disease, maybe in her 30s or 40s, that she was a redhead, and that her original monument had a last name, but that her embarrassed family replaced it with this monument. That version of the story says that the original monument was taken back to the family farm in Stewart County, but having done extensive research in Stewart County, I can tell you that there's no marker that's ever been found that bears this name or this death date. There are more rumors that maybe she wasn't a prostitute, but that she was the daughter of a prostitute. The late Miss Ruby Patch put forth a theory that maybe she was a daughter of a prostitute and that the men who attended the funeral each thought that they might be her father. Miss Ruby cited as her evidence this 1880 census record from Clarksville, in which we see a house of ill fame in District 12, Clarksville, including an Alice Johnson, age 23, whose occupation is prostitute, although misspelled, and the 3-year-old daughter here, Nellie Belle Johnson. So in 1892, when our Belle died, this child would have been 15 years old, hence Miss Ruby's speculation. So she went looking in the 1880 census and only found this person associated with the name Belle and prostitution. There's also speculation that a former caretaker of Riverview Cemetery, Miss Brandon, knew the identity of Belle, but took that to her grave. So based on all the speculation and rumors and the mystery surrounding Belle, I decided I wanted to see what I could add to the conversation. So I went looking for what we knew already, someone named Belle who died on November 12, 1892. And I kept in the back of my mind that maybe she was a prostitute or associated with prostitution somehow. So here's the big reveal of what I found. In Louisville, Kentucky death records, we show you here a mortuary record from November 1892. This is a ledger style book, so there's a left-hand side of the page and a right-hand side of the page. You can see here the columns of information that appear in this mortuary record. Name, sex, color, whether the person was married or single, age, disease, duration of disease, who the doctor was, the date of the death, nativity, where they were born, where they lived, where they were buried, when they were buried, and who the undertaker was. So here's the record. November of 1892, Belle Terry, female, white, widowed, age 28, says her disease was a disease of brain. And under duration of disease, it looks to me like TENN, which at that point I thought, well, that could mean Tennessee. But at this point, with this side of the page, we don't have anything concrete that ties her to the lady buried in Clarksville named Belle. But it's the right month, isn't it? So let's look at the right-hand side of this page. Dr. W.O. Roberts, date of death, November 12th, exactly what we need it to be. Nativity city, which would be Louisville here. So she was from Louisville, but her residence, there you go, Clarksville, Tennessee. Date of burial was the following day, the 13th, and her location, Clarksville, Tennessee. Undertaker Smith. So here we have someone named Belle who died the same day as our Belle and who was buried in Clarksville. I think I found it, don't you? So Belle Terry died November 12, 1892. She was widowed, according to her death record. Age 28, which would mean that she was born about 1864. The disease of brain got my attention because I think of syphilis and its long-term impact on the brain. That doesn't mean that she died of syphilis, but that's of course what I thought of because I was already thinking of the prostitute angle. So November 12, 1892, the day she died, was a Saturday. The funeral was the next day, a Sunday. And the Clarksville newspaper was not published on Sundays. And there is no mention in the Clarksville paper at all of her death. So I decided to go see what was happening in Clarksville on the day of her funeral. And what was happening there was a great revival by the famous Sam Jones, the most famous Methodist preacher of his day. The Leaf Chronicle reports the following day, Monday, that thousands were brought to the city that weekend to hear the great Sam Jones speak. Meetings were held in the Gracie Warehouse, and they were standing room only. The paper reports that trains poured in from all around Clarksville that day, that maybe as many as 10,000 people were in the city on that Sunday to hear Sam Jones speak. Sam Jones gained fame also because he inspired Captain Thomas Ryman to build what we now know as the Ryman Auditorium. And that auditorium actually opened just a few months prior to Belle's funeral. So the day of the funeral, we have the story that every carriage and hack in town was rented. Well, yes, it very well could have been because 10,000 people were in town needing transportation from the train station or to get around town to attend the meetings and see the town. So, yeah, it's absolutely got to be true that every carriage and hack in town was rented that day. And if there was a meeting in the morning, a revival meeting that morning, and another one did take place that Sunday evening, then all of these men in town had to have something to do during the afternoon. And if word was out that the famous prostitute Belle was going to have a funeral that day, that very well could explain the source of the tradition that there was a long funeral procession at the cemetery, and could also explain that, you know, if it's true that she was a prostitute, why no one got out of the carriages. So who was Belle Terry? Now that we know her last name, what can we find out about Belle Terry? Well, I scoured the newspapers and I only found one mention, but I did find a mention. In October 1888, the Leaf Chronicle reported contributors to a yellow fever fund, and among the list of that donors, Belle Terry donated $5 to the yellow fever fund. You'll notice that 2 lines above that, Austin Peay donated $2.50. This would be the father of Governor Austin Peay, future Governor Austin Peay. At this time, this Austin Peay was about 44 years old. So Belle Terry is listed as giving $5 herself in her own name to the Yellow Fever Fund. No husband mentioned to get credit for it, and at least with respect to the people listed near her, she gave a disproportionate amount of money. So this suggests that she was perhaps a single woman, perhaps a woman of means who was able to contribute to the Yellow Fever Fund. There were 101 donors on this list of this Yellow Fever Fund. There were only 2 women listed as donors, Belle being one of them. I didn't find an obituary, as I said, in the Clarksville paper for Belle on November 13th, but I did find one in Louisville. In the Louisville paper, Sunday, November 13th, the day of the funeral, there is an obituary for Belle. It lists her name as Betty Terry, and that could be another clue to be followed up on, but it repeats basically the same information we saw in the death record, that she was a widow, age 28, her home was at Clarksville. There is a great clue here that she formerly lived in Louisville, and they had come to be treated there for brain trouble. Body sent to Clarksville for burial, so that all matches the death record. The new part of this is that she formerly lived in the city. So based on that, I looked not only in Montgomery County records, but also in Louisville records. And I'll just show you, as we wrap up here, a list of the things I have looked for so far in trying to find Belle. Done a lot of research here at the Montgomery County Archives. Have not found a Mr. Terry mentioned in any marriage records. Looked in city directories in both Louisville and Clarksville. There's not many that survive for Clarksville, but they all survive for Louisville. And I didn't find a Belle Terry living in Louisville, at least according to the city directories. Of course, I did find her in both newspapers briefly. Didn't find her in any court records here. There's no will. There's no probate of an estate here. She didn't appear to own any land. We don't have the circuit court records for Montgomery County for this time period. So if she were indicted for prostitution, we wouldn't know that. And we also don't have the tax records for this period of time. So if she did own property and pay taxes on it, we don't know that either. In Louisville, as I showed you, we have the death record, but the birth records for Louisville are missing for the time period in which Belle would have been born. So if it's true that she was born in Louisville, the birth record for that seems to have been lost. There's a lot more research to be done. I need to look at court records for Jefferson County, Kentucky, just to see if I can find Belle or maybe who her family was. The records we found so far suggest that Terry was a married name and that she was a widow. But if it's true that she was a prostitute, then it's possible that Terry was a maiden name, and so I need to keep that possibility open. But at any regard, I've at least added to the conversation a last name for Belle, and I hope that you have enjoyed this information. I hope maybe I've inspired you to do a little bit of research and help uncover further information about the mysterious Belle. Thanks for watching.